Welcome one more day to Space and Harmony, an opportunity to go deep into our true self, our true nature, DNA, in harmonia with the whole cosmos, and the primordial source, the Holy One. And a very important aspect to go deep into this process of investigation is to have clear what's a deception, a spiritual deception in particular, especially nowadays, because lies are becoming more and more subtle, because those who are interested in keeping humanity asleep are finding ways of deceiving humans in a more sophisticated way, because people are waking up, so it's not so easy to deceive. However, people are still being deceived, and we have to explore how this works in spirituality, religion, even though it also affects knowledge in general, even science. Nowadays, science is so full of dogmas that it's a religion in itself. And when someone takes the courage to deny and prove that some of those dogmas are lies, these people are regarded as rebels or those who don't fit with social religion, and therefore they are criticized. We are seeing this nowadays with the question of the masks. Now it's compulsory to wear masks in public places in Spain. In theory, I would be violating the law right now because I'm not performing sports and I'm in a public place, but obviously there is no science to back up the need to wear masks even in public places. However, people are starting to criticize those who don't wear masks. Obviously not everyone, but some people definitely point with the finger, and there are fines for not wearing masks, especially in the city and other places. And to me, all this fits very well into an old strategy which was present in ancient religion but became more sophisticated with the Nazis and the communists. There is even a document where you can see this was even used by CIA. There are 8 steps. In any case, the first point is social distancing and isolation. Sounds familiar. The second is the monopolization of perception, making everyone perceive reality in a certain way. The third point is to debilitate people by means of psychological torture, for instance. Then there are threats. If you don't do this, you get a fine, a punishment. There are also indulgences. If you do this, you get this benefit. People are also made to believe that the state and science have omniscience and omnipotence. So many believe what they say when the state and science lead people into the slaughterhouse. And obviously there are other points, you can find them out, but let's focus on the subject of today, which is deception in the spiritual, religious side. The other day I was asked by a person who is introducing himself into spirituality how to distinguish when a teaching is New Age and when not. New Age is a type of religion which is emerging nowadays all over. It mixes up many different concepts and teachings from the East and the West. And that's, I think, the first characteristic. It's very syncretic. It mixes up mysticism, religion, and modern science, especially quantum science. They are obsessed with that. as if quantum science was a religion in itself, when it has many points which are debatable, they are not clear. And many use this religion in order to justify the idea that all is one because all is energy. And since energy is God or divine, then we are God. This is the main idea in most New Age movements. And it's full of wrong arguments because, as I have said in other occasions, oneness is not synonym of armonia. A pack of wolves attack their prey in unity. They all work together. Ants work together and they can bring down a house, the termites, for instance. And not all energies are divine. There are destructive energies. Obviously, everything is energy. But the Holy One, the limitless One, the Divine One, the infinite God, if you wish, cannot be reduced to an attribute or quality such as energy. That's just a quality. If we say God is something, then we are limiting the Holy One, which is impossible. Remember, the Holy One opens a space where energy flows and then it becomes life. But the Holy One remains in his limitless state. Energy becomes his dwelling. The Shekinah, the divine presence, Shekinah comes from Shahan, which is to dwell. And therefore we are the divine presence, the divine dwelling, where the Holy One seeds himself and grows within ourselves as our true divine self. So in that sense, we are the reproduction of the Holy One, and we become his consciousness, his awareness, the fulfillment of his purpose. But these are qualities which are not mentioned in the New Age because they mix up everything. And they even come to say that everything is an illusion, that this world is not real at all. But this is not exact, because we come here to make this world come back to true reality. Therefore, we have to assume our I amness and therefore make life real. This is our divine purpose. Life is real only then, when I am. Notice that if this was an illusion, I wouldn't pay attention not to step onto a serpent or fall into a ditch. Precisely by considering that all this around is just an illusion, leads many to think that the adversary does not exist either. This is very common in some Eastern teachings as well. And this is not exactly true, because the adversary came from a source of reality. And of course, they began to build their own physical world full of simulations, but this doesn't make evil less real. We have to assume that we are living in a solid reality, and therefore we have to work from where we are and move into deeper and deeper levels of reality. Obviously, this manifested world is the shadow of a deeper reality. Therefore, there are gradations of reality, as in Plato's cave. Another common idea in new ways of spirituality is the focus on the I amness as equal to the absolute, and also to a subject. It would be an absolute subject. But this is again a mistake, because the true self is both subject and object at the same time. It's complete, it's whole. We cannot split that which is whole. Actually, I think that's one of the reasons why they think all we see is an illusion. The manifestation has to be an expression of the observer. And in this world, there are fragmented things because there is a fragmented perception and also a fragmented self. As we move deeper and get into contact with our true divine I-amness, then even this reality is integrated into the Holy Presence. This is something which cannot be explained in words, you have to experience it. But it's when we feel at home anywhere, because we are the Divine Presence, where the Holy One dwells, even in this fragmented world. And the problem of considering someone as the Absolute in itself is that we are making the infinite God limited. Some say great sages and mystics like Ramana Maharshi were already fully enlightened and they were one with the Absolute. But we can see even them had diseases like cancer. He had a cancer in the arm. So how is it possible that he could not heal that on his own if he was the Absolute? I don't think he was fully enlightened. He had got into contact with divine selfhood, but it's necessary to develop the masculine side as well, the divine will. And that implies to develop the divine son within us. So what many call spiritual enlightenment is contact with the feminine side of reality, and that's incomplete. We can feel serenity, expansiveness, consciousness becoming more and more subtle, but those are still feminine qualities of the Divine Presence. We need to develop the divine purpose by exerting the divine will that we have been given. And curiously, many modern leaders, spiritual leaders, say that we don't have a purpose, that there is no purpose in life, that we only have to access the divine I-amness. And this to me proves they don't have any idea of what they are talking about. Because the most important, the most fundamental thing in a true spirituality is to have a purpose. That's what gives meaning to our life. To have a purpose is what allows us to develop will and conscience. And what is the purpose of human life? Well, bringing back a fallen world into the wholeness of divine presence. It's a simple purpose, but still difficult. It requires inner development, because consciousness and conscience do not grow mechanically. We need to dissolve all deceptions. And many of the mystics in the East and the West also give the impression that spiritual growth can be in isolation, away from others, and this is not the case either. We are all part of one divine soul, so our growth must be in group. We always come in family groups, so we must work in connection with others, never alone. But for now, let's keep moving into another aspect, which is the idea of channeling. In the New Age, there are many obsessed with getting into contact with other entities and even receiving teachings from them. There are actually books that have been channeled. One of them is, I think, The Law of One. The entity channeled is Ra, which is actually an Egyptian god. And many think these entities are wiser. Others speak of ascended masters, which were human, but now they would be teaching from the heights. And all this is not really in tune with the purpose of human life. We are not meant to be vehicles or marionettes of other entities, other humans. We are meant to develop our divine I amness. And obviously this does not mean other souls cannot get somehow attached to our soul and learn through us and even give some advices, but without forcing us to do things, which is actually what these supposedly channeled entities usually do. They move people into certain actions. And I'm sure many of them are the same type of entity that made the first Adamic species fall into the Garden of Eden. They are Jinn, the invisible ones, which now are invisible. In those days were not invisible, but nowadays these entities, which are animalistic, energetic, try to live through humans because we have energies they don't have. There are also fallen Adamic beings, what we call Baalim or Lucifers, and they also try to inspire their religion and they try to reproduce themselves through humanity. All these entities in general try to reproduce themselves through humanity in an illegitimate way, because we have been planted here by divine humanities legitimately, because we are meant to bring the divine light. But these other entities, they just plant their psychological eggs, or spiritual eggs, if you will. And the result are hybrid souls which cannot evolve. Many humans actually have hybrid souls. And I think this is one of the reasons why both in modern types of New Age spirituality and in ancient religions, one of the idols of worship were holy virgins and goddesses in general. You can find that in the figurines called Venuses, which represent the mother goddess. And many of them have a baby in their lap or their arms, like Isis and Horus. Then we have others which are reptilian in nature. And of course later on this was copied by Christianity. And nowadays many claim to be in contact with bird-like creatures, Corey Good for instance. I have met some of these beings myself. One of those species actually was amphibian. And this being, as I said in one video, told me that we come here to experience 0-point density. But nowadays I can understand that that's not really the purpose of our life. We come for greater awareness. 0-point energy is just the feminine side of reality. We need to develop divine will, the masculine side of reality, which is completely absent in humanity and in those species. This is why many cannot heal at will, whereas Master Yeshua was able to heal anyone, even from severe conditions such as people unable to walk, to see, etc. I don't think that was a metaphor. And let's not forget that most of the ancient religions were inspired by those invisible beings, especially Luciferic, fallen Adamic species, and also fallen architects from a higher rank, those who made themselves God over humanity. First over the Luciferic beings and later on over us. But in general, they all inspire religions. And if you notice, the main characteristic of all religions is that it displaces the perception of humanity towards the outside. Deities, images, temples where supposedly divine presence manifests, something which is not true, because as Stephen said in the chapter 7 of the Acts of the Apostles, the Holy One does not dwell in temples made by human hands. However, temples are useful to generate social obedience, as well as rituals. But if you notice, all that sears conscience, blocks up conscience and consciousness, because it does not let people into self-discovery, inner growth. And it also blocks divine will, something which is even a contradiction, because even religion says that the purpose of human life is to fulfill divine will. But if you notice, not even the Holy One would kneel down in a temple to pray. That is not his will. Not even the will of those who claim to be gods over humanity. They find religion useful to make humans release certain energies that they use, but that's all. Another very useful strategy to generate social obedience is the use of a certain language, and a specific language which in many cases is completely twisted and distorted, dark, full of codes, and that's a characteristic of religions. Even the so-called sacred books are usually mistranslated, and that makes things even worse. But the original language of many sacred texts is a language of the soul, and therefore nowadays almost no one can understand that, unless they study deeply. But as we have seen, religious language has generated wars all over, misunderstandings, divisions, hatred. So this is not the way of life. The Holy One would never use that mean. Only false gods use external languages. Another characteristic of old and modern religions, even the New Age, is the idea of reconnecting or relegating. Actually, religion comes from religare in Latin, which means to legate again. And this is also deceptive, because in reality we don't have to relegate anything. If we are our true divine self, then we are already connected. We only have to realize what we are and be what we really are, not what others want us to be. But in order for that to take place, we must assume that we have a purpose, a divine purpose in life. All life has a purpose, and therefore we must walk in that purpose, using divine will, divine force, expanding our conscience, which becomes merciful, full of right discernment, recognizing beauty within and in others. True conscience also harmonizes emotions and helps us overcome laziness and inertia. True conscience shows us how we are, and therefore help us be honest with others. And it's also expansive, like consciousness, like awareness, like perception. Those are qualities that must grow in us, and they lead to serenity, the feminine aspect. And obviously we begin with consciousness and serenity. That's the beginning, not the end. Even a sage came to say that enlightenment is not a place of permanent residence. So it's something that we work on day by day as a seed that is planted and has to grow. The seed of divine will is planted on the earth. The shell of darkness has to break up, and it grows with the nutrients of life. And all seeds have potential, therefore all seeds have a purpose. Therefore this work implies dissolving all deception, all darkness, in all the centers of perception. And this is related to another point. If you notice, many of the New Age movements are obsessed with Kundalini work and third eye activation. Supposedly, they bring the Kundalini, the energy stored in the sacrum bone, up to the third eye in order to see reality, divine reality, and acquire powers. But this is not the way of life either. First of all, Kundalini, as I have said in other occasions, is a psychic type of energy, serpent energy, which makes us perceive reality in a distorted way. And it can even replace a true perception. It can make people think they are enlightened when they are not. This is the problem of taking only into consideration the feminine aspect of divine growth. Kundalini only plays a role of reproduction in nature, of creativity, but that's all. It doesn't lead to enlightenment. What is important to do is to open the seven seals. Even the book of Revelation and the Sephirotic tree contains those seals, but we can find this inside. And we also have to dissolve different astral implants which are deposited by invisible entities, invisible to us, but they can be seen when we develop perception. And to wrap this subject up, let's move into the seven centers where deception takes place. The first would be the one which is in contact with this physical reality, the one that anchors us to the earth. And it's a center which is usually blocked by false perceptions concerning sustenance, the way of making a living, having positive or negative attitudes towards money. So we have to work this aspect in order to open this center of perception and realize that abundance comes when we are in tune with our true purpose. Everyone has a mission, and when we are aligned, everything comes at the right time, in the right moment. The second center would be associated with sexuality. There are also many wrong beliefs around this. Many think that sexuality can lead to enlightenment, but sexuality is part of the fallen world. In the true reality there is wholeness, so there is not really a division of masculine and feminine as we understand it. There are many misconceptions about all this, and the seal of sexuality is usually very strong. People are actually kept trapped in this world because of their attitude towards sexuality, obsessions with it. In the third place we have the solar plexus, the center of emotions, and this becomes disorganized not only because of false perceptions, but also due to a disharmonious way of eating. The intestines are connected to the emotions, so any problem there is going to generate depression, sadness, low energy, even rage. And then we have the heart, the center of the heart, which is usually blocked by vanities, pride, jealousies. And these are implanted in many occasions by means of ritualistic behaviors, languages coming from religion. Actually, the heart is the seat of Jezebel. That's in the book of Revelation. And this is connected to the throat, the center in the throat, which has to do with communication. It's important to express the truth clearly, because that somehow is an expression of consciousness. But it's also related to the cleanness of language. A bad language usually blocks the centers of perception. And this is also related to the third eye, the sixth center. And the third eye is usually blocked not only because the other centers are sealed, but also because there is no development of true consciousness, awareness, and conscience. So the important work is not the pineal gland in itself, as some say. New Age movements are obsessed with developing mental powers by activating the pineal gland and even decalcifying the pineal gland, but the work must be on becoming more aware of what we are doing here and now, how we live, how we eat, how we relate with others, how we access wholeness within. And all that obviously activates the pineal gland, but indirectly. We don't work directly on the pineal gland. That's the way of many old spiritualities which never work. Then we have the crown, the center in the crown, which is related to the unconscious, to the spot where many entities get attached in order to become our daimonic self. The crown should be the seat of the will, of divine will, divine spirit, but it's usually hijacked. The throne is hijacked by entities which are not human, or entities which are Adamic, but they don't have the right to take possession of humanity. And many of these beings also deposit psychic astral implants, psychic energies, which block the centers. But they sometimes do it through other humans, because these implants can come through movies, violent movies, movies full of irrational sexuality. They also come through deceptive publicity, threats, mix-up languages, religious languages, which are full of codes that people cannot understand, and therefore they create blockages in the unconscious. But implants are also deposited in dreams. Anyway, this is a very extensive subject. If you are interested and you want me to speak further, let me know in the comments. I can make a video speaking about dissolving implants and opening seals. But let's leave all this for the moment. Remember that the most important to overcome deception is to have a clear idea of our purpose in life, exerting the divine will we have been given to expand our conscience and relate deeply with life here and now, helping other souls to become integrated into the great divine soul, the soul of the primordial man, which is the expression of the Holy One, the Infinite One. Each one of us is meant to be an expression of the Holy One, and therefore express the divine qualities. So, as always, thank you very much for listening with attention. If this was inspiring to you, give thumbs up to promote the channel. Make comments if you wish, that's also helpful. It's not easy to keep channels like this, because nowadays they are being attacked. Many channels are being shut down for saying things not in accord with general religion. I know a person, Brother Pedro, whose channel is sometimes blocked because of the things he says. And this is usually more common in those who have more than 1,000 subscribers. But those of us who have less subscribers also receive strange messages. Anyway, I'll keep working, trying to maintain the channel in the surface. And until the next time, let's keep bringing every perception into divine awareness to integrate everything into wholeness. fulfilling the divine will, manifesting the unconditional love that opens a space to the unmodified life, integral, expansive conscience and consciousness, feeling a deep, blissful serenity.